Day 1352 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,147,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,170 lost in the past day. Then as for hardware, no tanks, 6 APVs, 15 artillery, but also another oil refinery strike and substation strike, which leads us direct to the map, because over the past 3 weeks, Ukrainian warriors have fried or partially cooked 24 energy facilities on the territory of Russia. And so to start around 500 kilometers or about 310 miles deep, where Ukraine has intensified its drone war into Russia's energy rear again, with unmanned aircraft striking the Lukoil-run Volgograd oil refinery on the outskirts of the city overnight. Regional authorities acknowledged a UAV attack on the enterprise and a fire in the industrial zone, while local channels reported multiple strikes on the refinery complex as the attack continued through the night. This plant, once Russia's 6th largest refinery by production output, processed around 5 to 6% of the country's entire refining capacity, but as of now has already been hit several times since the full-scale invasion begun, twice last year and 7 times this year. In fact, this would now mark the 8th time, forcing shutdowns and repairs, which now makes this latest strike feel less like a lucky shot and more like a reoccurring calendar reminder for the Kremlin's energy planners. Ultimately, and over the long term, repeated hits on top 10 refiners underlines an unstoppable and gradual erosion of Russia's refined oil outputs, turning what used to be seen as safe infrastructure, now very much a Kremlin miscalculation, morphing these sites into a standing wartime liability. Meanwhile, in a separate but likely related incident, footage and social media posts claim a missile fired from a Russian Pantsir air defense system struck a residential block in Volgograd while intercepting drones. The Pantsir S1 S2 air defense system is a short to medium range surface-to-air missile system designed to intercept targets at relatively low altitudes, theoretically making them useful against drones and low-flying objects. But the flight path on this occasion clearly traverses high-rise structures, leading to more poorly performing Pantsir outcomes, as is shockingly and usually the case. Now to Russia's energy front, where the war's quietest weapon isn't just a missile, but arithmetic, with 380 million barrels of crude already stranded at sea, and exports plunging 30% in a week. Moscow is running out of places to send its own lifeblood. Ukraine's campaign of refinery strikes has turned the system inside out, from shortage to glut, forcing the Kremlin into a reverse supply chain crisis. Storage is full, refineries are crippled, and drilling rigs face the one scenario no oil state can survive: a forced stop. Because once the well goes cold, reopening can cost billions, if it's even technically feasible without Western tech. The result is a slow-motion collapse of Russia's oil machine, drained not by embargoes, but exhaustion, sanctions, and a handful of well-placed drones. Then next up on the Russian menu map, to the Tver Oblast for inbound flying sanctions, which included the targeting of the Vladimirskaya 750 kilovolt substation, struck last night, and attacked for a third time now, first on October 17th, followed by the second haunting on October 31st, and it's no surprise given its importance. The Vladimirskaya substation is a critical node in Russia's power grid, channeling electricity from the Kalinin nuclear power plant to Moscow and the surrounding industrial belt. It's the very loss of stable high-voltage supply that can curtail electrical power to air defense radars and command nodes, disrupt rail hubs that rely on grid power, and slow production lines at nearby military-industrial plants, complicating sustainment, munitions manufacture, and battlefield coordination, all in a single strike. Then to head directly south on the map in Oryol of Russia, as there's a large steel plant cranking out the metal for Russia's war machines, think caliber cruise missiles, Pantsir defenses, and tank armor for the front lines. And it's where, on that note, Atesh partisans in the area did a little recon mission, mapping out the details of the entire plant, snagging photos, internal manufacturing flows, sketches, the whole deal. And they weren't keeping it to themselves. They've already passed it off to Ukraine's UDF drone team, setting up what could be a nasty payback. Now, the intel comes as follow-up to previous identification of the site, where in one such instance, a disgruntled Russian worker from a few months ago, not getting paid for working at the facility, broadcast a message on social media to essentially say, "Hit this target. I am not getting paid." Then next up on the map, and to Rostov, in fact the city of Rostov-on-Don, briefly, as a powerful fire at a polystyrene warehouse was set alight, with inbound Ukrainian UAVs presumed to have been involved in this latest incident. The building can no longer be saved. It is completely burning over an area of more than 1,000 square meters, which is about 10,000 plus square feet. And then next up, being close enough to the region, and to a quick follow-up on Ukraine's November 2nd strike on the Tuapse port, which has left one of Russia's major oil export hubs out of commission, with the port and its associated refinery halting operations and all loading activities suspended. Berths 1A, 1B, and 2 through 6 are typically busy with tankers, but now float empty, with no vessels currently docked. As such, this disruption severely impacts Russia's fuel export capacity, particularly to markets like China and Turkey, and tightens its already strained oil export operations. If the halt continues, Russia faces the risk of more export bottlenecks and delays, and I have a sneaking suspicion that this is just the early days for Black Sea oil export halts, bottlenecks, and delays for Russia. Kind of a new entrant in the field. Then next up on the map, and to the border, as Russian channels from the Kursk front shared footage of their troops shouting, quote, "Everything's collapsing, we need to get out, we've got gas canisters in here," end quote, as they were claiming their positions were being smoked out. The clip's location hasn't been verified, but what certainly can be verified in the very least was that they had to stop their break time, which included coffee, alcohol, cigarettes, Oreos, and, wouldn't you know it, extra large wet wipes. Taking that break to get up and attend the fiery debacle of their site that had been compromised. They'll be needing those extra large wet wipes a little later. Now to the main map, as Ukraine's missile strike has hit a major Russian ammunition depot in Donetsk, causing a massive explosion followed by confirmed secondary munition pop-offs. The missile used was one of Ukraine's smaller, precise and hybrid forms, the Pilancia, designed for these kinds of pinpoint attacks. And of course, Donetsk is a major hub for Russian operations, with this depot that was very likely a critical source of ammo for Russian forces that is now out of commission. And it's the proximity and timing to the major front lines of the Donbass right now that surely cannot go unnoticed, as these supplies directly aid Russian activity in the Pokrovsk sector and beyond. But with that depot gone, Russia's pushes in the area are very likely to become stymied. Armoured units now running low on shells, crews forced to ration or sit idle, and all units of which depend on firepower to continue their operational tempo. And on these topics, speaking of Pokrovsk, where Ukraine's forces aren't pulling back, but digging in still. According to Ukrainian military analyst Sergei Flash, a military political decision has been made to hold the Pokrovsk Myrnorad agglomeration for as long as possible, with all available reserves committed. On the ground, Ukraine's 425th Separate Assault Battalion, Skala, has led coordinated strike and search operations, clearing the Pokrovsk City Council building, had also fought off ambushes, and raised the Ukrainian flag once again over the city centre, a symbolic moment in what's become a brutal urban fight. Ukrainian command says defences are reinforced, logistics lines are remaining intact, and Russian reports of encirclement have been, to date, disinformation, and where in the past day, over 200 casualties on this pinpoint part of the map, with a smaller share of that coming from wounded in action, and with multiple enemy shelters, a UAV antenna, and a ground robot that were destroyed. Now as for nearby Myrnorad, Russian forces attempted an assault using heavy armor under poor weather conditions, and where Ukrainian troops from the 79th Air Assault Brigade repelled the attack using fiber optic guided drones, destroying several armored vehicles. Meanwhile, just to the north at Radinsk, paratroopers of of the 95th destroy the last Russians who entered the settlement. The paratroopers came as reinforcements to clear the town, which is on the road to Pokrovsk. And then next up to the adjacent Dobra Pillar front, with 3 of 4 pockets cleared. This had also led to the AFU advances further to Shakova on the eastern edge. Then as for other various activities, other engagements to be found on the front, with a brief mention for Ukrainian soldiers from the Signum Battalion continued their operations in the Lerman direction, eliminating Russian infantry and destroying a truck and several smaller vehicles. Then next up on the map, up in Kupiansk, from a different light, with another example of newly minted Russian POWs, this time a 20-year-old Russian captured near the town, who said he quickly decided to surrender because he had promised his mother he would come back home. He said he's young, just 20, didn't give surrender a second thought, but do note, with surrender not really allowed in the Russian army these days, unless under the most extreme of circumstances, but probably not even then. This man will be back into the front as soon as he's been traded. It's either jail time or the front line for him, which in Russia means pretty much the same thing these days. Also to be seen on the map, somewhere in the east, a deaf-mute Russian tank crew member named Andrei Piroznikov spoke about the situation at the front, or should I say, signed about it, and it seems his sign language is far from perfect, but something that's clear here is that he's not throwing up gang signs or peace signs, as in this account, he refers to all of the Cargo 200s, the KIAs, and the Cargo 300s, WIAs, lost from his unit. Though out of all of this, I am left wondering, how do you function as a tank crew member if you can't hear or give orders? Russian standards are clearly not what they used to be. Then also, somewhere in the east, hard to get a location on this one, but it's footage from Russians reporting strikes on their strongpoints and bunker, saying, quote, "They've wrecked us. Those damned cockholes," a derogatory term for Ukrainian. Also from the map, a duel between a Russian soldier armed with a stick coming up against a Ukrainian FPV drone. Just prior to this, the occupier's vehicle armor had been destroyed. Now, it's not nice to play with your food drone. Then next up, and something we'll undoubtedly see more of in the up-and-comings, with more maritime adventures by Russian Marines in Ukrainian mud puddles, as this type of terrain continues to pose a significant obstacle to the Russian armored push. After all, it's already November. Next up, and more to be seen of the ambusher becoming the ambushee, as Ukrainian soldiers from the 35th Marine Brigade destroy another Russian FPV drone waiting in ambush. Then to a couple of quick bites of news. Firstly, Germany plans to increase military support to Ukraine by 3 billion euros in 2026, up from the 8.5 billion euros already allocated for military aid to Ukraine for next year. These funds will be used to purchase artillery shells, armored vehicles, air defense systems, drones, and various transport means, as Germany ramps up further support for Ukraine. And then, so to a similar bout of news, NATO has confirmed plans to provide 60 billion in US dollars of military assistance to Ukraine during 2026, according to senior alliance official Patrick Turner. He stated this figure reflects a rise from roughly 50 billion in 2025 and forms part of the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, or Pearl initiative. He described the 60 billion commitment as very large and practical support, and said that it corresponds to around half of Ukraine's expected 120 billion defense budget for 2026, with Kyiv financing the remainder. And so strategically, the expanded NATO funding signals a deepening commitment by the alliance to sustain Ukraine's warfighting capacity at scale, while shifting some burden onto its members to supply major systems and ammunition. Then to a couple of mildly amusing segments to round out the video today with. Firstly, to Belarus. Seen training by way of implementing tactics from the war in Ukraine, which includes getting on the motorcycle bandwagon and also the tank shed bandwagon. Moves coming straight out of the Russian playbook, with President Lukashenko too afraid to enter the war and thereby avoid almost instantaneously destroying his comfortable dictatorship. So instead, through the Belarusian Ministry of Defense, showing this imagery, very keen to play the middle ground and show Putin that Belarus is still a loyal ally by mimicking the very reality the Russian army now faces. That'll do it. Then to round out the video with some stellar journalism coming out of Russia's MK.ru news outlet, with the hot news topic of the day. Putin speaking about Russia's uniqueness. That's one way to describe it. Because according to MKRU, Putin claims Russia's uniqueness comes down to math, with apparently 194 ethnic groups inside the country, which could be especially true when the country's idea of unique includes invading itself a few centuries earlier. It's not the largest country on the planet for nothing. But with this news comes no maps, no analysis, no context, just a single number. So it's really about what we don't see in the article and other articles advertised on this news site of Russia's, with little on the war apart from some Gerons reported to have destroyed a Ukrainian railway hub, which is a little bit odd because despite every corner of Russian life now being shaped by this war, from fuel prices and empty shelves to sons missing from villages and sanctions biting through entire industries, but the state-controlled media would rather make the main stage news about an entirely useless puff piece about how unique Russia is. This is what a downfall looks like. Heads still in the sand. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks once again for all the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!